You're listening to Zoned Out with Joe and Freddy. Hi, I'm Freddy. And that's Joe.
Hi, Freddy. I'm Joe.
What's up, Joe?
Hi, Freddy.
Oh,
You may have noticed there's a little bit of a rasp to my voice. I'm dealing with some sinus stuff, and hopefully it doesn't linger too long, but that remains to be seen.
you sound good. When you were warning me that you were concerned that you were going to sound bad, but you sound good.
I think I've just cleared everything out. So you do that thing when you're sick sometimes where you're just like, you get the few minutes of like, okay, I blew my nose and whatever and cleared my throat, and now I sound good for a little while. So I'll hang on to it as long as I can.
I have a sinus pulse for when I get those. I highly recommend it. It's just like
What's this?
The sinus pulse is like a neti pot kind of, but it's powered. It's kind of like a water pick for your sinuses.
That sounds dangerous. I mean, like not actually dangerous, but like I would feel like I'd be blowing my sinuses out every 10 minutes.
It feels good. It's an incredible feeling when it works. It'll clear you out. It'll make you feel like you're not sick for like a couple of hours.
We should reach out to them for a sponsorship.
Yeah. We call it the booger blaster in our house. Amy can't handle it. She can't do it.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
A water pick is sometimes that'll get right into your gums. When I first started using one, I was like, I hate this. And then I used it for like 3 days and I was like, oh, this is the best thing ever.
Ooh, maybe I need to get a water pick. I should do that. Anyways, perchance to dream of a water pick.
Oh, yeah. Hey, zoned out.
Yeah. We zoned out for a minute. We were talking about how we're both bad for digressing before we started recording. And then we decided we had a big, long conversation after that and forgot what we were doing. We were here to talk about Twilight Zone.
Turns out we do a Twilight Zone podcast.
Yeah.
Who knew?
This one aired on November 27th, 1959, which was my dad's 10th birthday.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was cool. And this had a cast of 8, including Serling. So that the old numerological theory of the Twilight Zone has fallen apart, I think, officially at this point. We're all over the chart now with cast sizes.
I wonder if it's one of those things that he started with and he was like, oh, we should keep it to this. And then he's like, yeah, that's totally not practical.
It's not practical. We're going to need more people. The minimalism thing over these next couple of episodes, really, I think especially this next one, not the one we're talking about today. This one still has that minimalist vibe to it. But the next week, the one we get to, that whole idea of small scale feels like it was kind of thrown out the window.
Yeah.
Much more ambitious. But this one's still, Perchance to Dream is still kind of a cozy episode where it's basically 3 characters. And you are so good at doing these synopses.
It's like
hold on. Wait, I lost you on here. Let's try again.
I'm hearing you different in your studio, but
yeah.
There we go. And yeah, what's funny about this with this small cast is they did manage to bring in some really interesting visual elements into this too. And as far as I can tell, this is the first like flashback episode. I could be wrong on that, but where they did like a dream sequence to show, within the actual episode.
Yeah, and he has like a lot of this episode is a nightmare. And I think man, so many things kind of, and I feel like even Carnival of Souls came after this, right? And this has that kind of off-kilter vibe that is, it's just a quirky looking dreamy set piece where everything is just off-kilter and Carnival and Funhouse Mirror style stuff.
Right. And it does the angled camera angles for things that are kind of off balance or not normal that I think we've established that the Twilight Zone is known for, but it also adds these elements of like, there's like a fringe around the side of it and it looks a little fuzzy. And so they played with some additional camera elements there that I thought were really intriguing. Also, if you're into like creepy old circus sideshow stuff, you're going to love this. It's got the campy, cheesy Batman dancing at one point, which was actually kind of seductive at one point.
Yeah, yeah.
But the creepy parts I found, ironically, really creepy because of the additional element of the age of it and the look and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Well, this is Robert Flory directed this one. It's the first of 3 that he's going to do. The other 2 are The Fever, that's in season 1 here, and The Long Morrow at the end of this series in season 5. He was mostly a TV director. He worked on like the big anthology series like The Outer Limits and Alfred Hitchcock Presents and Thriller and all that stuff that I binge at night. He developed a passion for Hollywood in his teens and moved to America. I think he was Swiss in the 20s, and he was actually supposed to work on Frankenstein at one point, which I thought was really interesting before they brought James Whale on to direct it. At one point, he was rumored to be getting that job. And instead, he ended up directing Murders in the Rue Morgue, which is also great.
interesting.
Yeah, he directed the first Marx Brothers movie too, Cocoa Nuts.
You know what I'm curious? It does so at the very beginning of this show, and we'll get in the synopsis in just a second. We see the protagonist, and I love the first shot, which is just this hand down on this skyscraper model, which is foreshadowing. And it just comes down, and then this guy's kind of staggering into this building, and someone comes up to him and says, "Hey, buddy, you okay?" You know, and you feeling all right? And he has a little bit of an accent, and I wondered if that was the director because it sounds. I was trying to place the accent. It was like, is it Swiss or something? But it was definitely an accent that
Yeah.
he was trying to sound,
Well,
or
that's
he sounded American with a thick accent.
that's Richard Conte, who if you like The Godfather, he's like the evil Don who's like wants to bring drugs in.
Barzini.
Yeah. And so he's like, everyone in The Godfather is a bad guy, but he's supposed to be the worst guy. He played an exorcist. Did you know about this? The Italian exorcist knockoff?
No.
He was the exorcist in that movie. It's called The Return of the Exorcist. It was his last role.
Interesting.
And I haven't seen it, but it's supposed to be really, really bad.
Oh no.
So now I really want to see it.
He has that I can't remember the actor's name, but that Father Karras kind of look.
Yeah, he
to him.
does. Yeah. He's got a great face. He's much older. And this is kind of interesting that happens throughout the Twilight Zone. Sometimes they cast actors that are much older than the characters they're playing. Like he's 49 when they made this, and I think he's playing someone who's supposed to be like 30, which I thought was really fun. I think they might have done that to show what not sleeping for 4 days does to you.
The haggard appearance is inherent in age.
Yeah, that's like an easy way to get there. You're like, the guy's going to look like hell the whole episode. It's not like you have to take a young guy and then make him look like hell because he's already screwed up at this point at the very beginning.
They do a good job. And this one, especially with like doing the sweat on his face and all that kind of look. And there's a couple of things real early on that, again, if you've seen the episode, you'll notice are clues that have occurred before. But I do love the Twilight Zone close-ups for that kind of detail with the black and white, where you actually see the actors are sweating, or they're they're really those nuanced pieces of that.
Yeah, they look like, a lot of times they just look like charcoal drawings. Sometimes at their very best, you're like, wow. Or Tim Burton owes a lot to episodes like this. I think it would be, very influential on him too. But I love, he's gone to this high rise. Conti has, I forgot the character's name, Edward.
Yeah. Edward Hall. Yeah. You go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say he's at the high rise, and then I was just reestablishing where you were, sir.
Oh yeah, sure. So he gets in there and he steps into a receptionist's office, and we see the receptionist from behind saying, "We've been expecting you, Mr. Hall." And he looks at her with this kind of 1,000-yard stare, which, you don't really think of much at the beginning, kind of trying to figure out what's going on. And she goes, "Go right in." And he heads into the office, and There's a doctor in there, and I think it's pretty clear that this is a a psychologist, but he's not wearing like a white lab coat, I don't think.
Yeah, he's got
But
almost a Freudy vibe.
right, right. So he goes, "Hello, Mr. Hall," and Edward kind of slumps over this credenza desk thing, and he's like, "Oh, what's the matter? Are you ill?" And the guy says, "No, I'm just tired." And he said, "Well, you better rest over here, Mr. Hall." And so he kind of helps him over to his doctor's couch and he says, "Here, sit down."
It's a nice
And
leather chaise or
yeah, he
whatever.
tells him to sit down, but of course he's actually laying down, and he's got it's the whole traditional doctor's, lay down and tell me your secrets. Um,
It's all your
and
mother. That doctor, by the
right.
way, that's John Larch, who was the chief in Dirty Harry, the police chief, and then
Oh,
yeah, he was in Play Misty for me. So he's with Eastwood a couple of times, but then he was his best role, in my opinion, Airplane 2, the prosecutor who was like when he was like, when he had the doctor on the stand, the psychiatrist, and he says, what's your impression of Stryker's frame of mind at the time or whatever it was, and he says, I don't do impressions. My field is psychology. That little that's like a classic film moment for me. I
yeah,
love it.
yeah. It's the catching the puns. So good. Um, the so he lays down and he does, you're right. It totally has that kind of doctor vibe. And when he lays down in a traditional Twilight Zone mode, there's this music that plays in the background, and you do see the lights change, which this kind of shadows pass over his face, which if you remember from I think One for the Angels and a couple others, shadows can have a real um, indication of something, foreshadowing, literally, of something going on.
Death usually.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And he closes his eyes, and that happens. And then all of a sudden he leaps up, whips open his eyes and leaps up. And the doctor's like, "I thought you were tired." And he goes, "I am. I'm the tiredest man in the world." And he does that traditional, like, weird 50s, which I associate with like the 20s and 30s, but the quick delivery is like, I am the tiredest man in the world. Do you want to know how many hours I've been awake? 87 hours. It's almost 4 days and nights. Like, okay, exposition. Here we go.
Reminds me of like an SNL character.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because you see those characteristics in Richard Conte later as he plays these characters in like The Godfather. It's not quite as extreme. You can tell he's tempered it, but he's got that sharp delivery.
Yeah.
Real quick.
Very tense.
Yeah. And he goes, doctor's like, you can't go to sleep? Is that it? And he goes, no, doctor, not can't, mustn't. I mustn't go to sleep. If I do, I'll never wake up. And then it's the surge of the music and commercial break. So it's,
oh boy,
it's yeah, setting the
Speaking
stage.
of the music on this one, I wanted to say the theme, and this is, I didn't verify this on my own, but according to IMDb, this is the first time that the theme of the Twilight Zone opens the show.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because on the versions that I watched, which I think are from the DVDs or the Blu-rays, I saw that and I went back to the previous episode, and on my whatever I was watching, the previous episode also had it, but I mean it was one of the right around here where they and it's nuanced, it's slightly different. Yeah,
Yeah, and I almost feel like I don't even know if the versions I'm watching hold true to that piece of trivia, but I thought it was interesting. Yeah. And they also, this is the first one that they had Van Cleve compose the score for, and he ended up doing 11 episodes, and a lot of his stock music was used in like other episodes. But he was the guy who arranged all the orchestra pieces for White Christmas.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. And he also did the score for Funny Face, which was huge.
It was Barbara Streisand, right?
Yeah, Barbara Streisand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they clipped a commercial break. They come back, and they're in the doctor's office, and Edward is pacing back and forth. This is the part that kind of threw me. That it's like they were trying to figure out how to get to the point where they could get you in the mindset of this person.
Yeah, to transition to the dream world, like a night. It's like it's very much a Nightmare on Elm Street kind of the shift.
Yeah. Well, and it's weird because it felt kind of, to me, kind of stilted at the beginning. And he walks over to a painting and he says, hey, you know, I had this picture when I was a kid. And oh, wait, before that, he goes to open the window and he's like, can I get some air? And he slams it open and there's no screen or anything. He's just like looking down.
And it's
like,
lower. The ledge is below your waist.
Yeah.
Like it's designed like designed for tragedy.
Right. And it's a huge window. I was like, wow, that's like, you don't want to just lean the wrong way around that thing.
Yeah.
And the doctor's like, I wish you wouldn't. And comes over and shuts the window and he's like, I'll turn the air conditioning on. And he's like, what do you think? I'm going to jump? And the doctor's like, I'd rather not take the risk. And he's like, he goes back into that punchy speech mode. He's like, well, that's just the thing, doc. I want to live. That's the problem, you know?
Yeah. And more foreshadowing with this window.
Right.
It becomes important later.
Oh, man. Okay. Yeah. He goes over to this painting on the wall and he starts talking about how he, when he was a kid, you know, he had a painting. His family had one similar to that. And his mom said, if you stare at it long enough, you can make it move and stuff. And he said, pretty soon I was staring at it long enough to make it move. And then I couldn't look at it and not see it move.
I love that.
Like, it was like interesting. Like, and this is where I feel like it's a little nuanced. It's a little something in there. And I wasn't exactly sure where it was going with that. I was like, does this have psychic powers or something? Because I couldn't remember this episode at all.
You know, I got a vibe of almost like he had a mental illness, and the thing that pushed him right over the edge was just encouraging his creativity, and it became unbounded.
Right.
You know?
There's an aspect of that that I think of a lot with people who are creative, who do that creative work, where it often seems like going into a creative mode is pushing the boundary.
It's insanity.
Try
to create something out of nothing for the sake of only doing it is kind of insane. Because you know, like, and you have to like to push storytelling. Like, I feel like maybe, and this, by the way, we didn't mention Charles Beaumont wrote this, who is prolific. When you talk about the Twilight Zone, like, he is next to Rod Serling. Charles Beaumont shaped what it is, and he was the one who really brought the horror to the Twilight Zone. He did the Howling Man, long distance call, spooky stuff. But this was originally in The Hunger and Other Stories, which is an anthology. But he did like the Premature Burial and the Haunted Palace screenplays for Roger Corman.
Oh, okay.
He's just got tons of cred. But also, I think getting back to what made me think of that with the author of the piece is that I think he has probably been in a state of delusion and hallucination in his life based on reading his stuff so long. Because the imagination goes to a place that almost feels like an LSD user almost. Like, but still it's held together beautifully as like a story, and it has familiar structure, but there's stuff in there I think he had probably was like right on the verge of a mental some kind of break at points. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned that, like, that kind of right on the verge of it, where it's still this still felt very approachable. Like, it's understandable story that people could relate to. And I think, again, that the Twilight Zone does such a good job of presenting a situation that people don't normally find themselves in, but still can relate to and have enough that they can connect to. And I have to believe that that's completely intentional in that storytelling. It's funny because when you mentioned, I was just listening to some recent episodes of NOTLP, Night of the Living podcast, which you probably know if you were listening. And you mentioned a movie called Into the Void.
Oh, Into the Void is so great.
Which has some trippy, like, aspects, and I've never seen it myself. I want to watch it, but it made me feel like there were elements of that, just
Yeah.
all that kind of around your mental state and what is insanity, what is sanity, what is the line between.
The blurred line of what an out of body experience is. It the drugs? Is it all that?
Yeah. And so bringing it back with this, he mentions after this thing with the painting that he'd heard about on the radio a woman who um, said that the mind is everything is one of the things that they said back and forth, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
And he said at 15 he developed a rheumatic heart, so he couldn't have any shocks or anything like that, and where it would kill him. And he said no shocks. He said, but they forgot about my imagination, which was kind of like you could read that as a very subtle line, but I kind of dig it because it sets the stage for everything after.
And it's scary.
Yeah. Well,
Insanity,
I mean, this guy's
is scary.
He's threatening his own life by the fact that he is an imaginative person, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of mind blowing and freaky. And so he talks about a story, a recent news report about a woman who was killed in her car because there was somebody in the back seat, and he said he couldn't stop thinking about it. And that's that obsessive behavior there. And when he was driving on this dangerous road in the canyon, you see a little flashback there. And this is where you're seeing him imagining this. He kept imagining someone in the rearview mirror. And which is, I thought was really interesting. He kept imagining a male presence. He said and all this with this person in the back seat. But then you see, as they're showing you in the flashback, he sees a woman's eyes.
Yeah.
In the rearview mirror.
With great eye makeup.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Fabulous. She's got the full pails on both sides.
Like a cut crease or something.
Yeah.
I learned a word
whatever
once.
it is.
Yeah. I don't know.
Oh yeah. So then he jumps to, he's like, hey doc, do you remember those old cereals when we were a kid? Which whenever I hear that, the first thing I think is breakfast cereal.
Yeah. That's funny.
But he's talking about, for those who aren't familiar, in movies years and years ago, before the main attraction or whatever, they would have like a little snippet, almost like a running series.
Yeah, like Flash Gordon.
Yeah, like it was an episode of something that would keep you wanting to see the next one, so they'd leave it in a cliffhanger. And that's where Indiana Jones came from, the idea of doing one of those as a film. And so he's talking about these serials, and he said, I used to dream in sequence like that, where it would go to sleep and I'd wake up and I'd have the next segment. And then he starts telling the story about a dream in an amusement park that he had that was really twisted and distorted. He said it's like it was, but it was really messed up and it was all, I guess, distorted. And in this dream, he sees this Maya, the cat girl, dancing, which she did a pretty seductive dance for the 50s.
She moved like one of those Orion slave girls from Star Trek. The green, you remember the green dancing alien girl?
Yeah.
Like she has the same moves. I feel like it's like the same choreographer.
It was almost like if you took the old Batman series.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The old Batman show.
66.
Adam West, and the dancing, the Batusi, and all those dances from there.
I love that shit.
It was like that, but a little bit more like she was actually doing the dance. Yeah,
she was hot.
And he was saying,
sorry, that's Suzanne Lloyd, who was on the Saint TV series.
Oh yeah, okay,
as Maya, or later she's two characters in this. I won't spoil it.
Yeah. So he's talking about it in the voiceover. He's saying how he knew he had to get away from her and her like dark eyes. And so he runs away, but a moment later he's trying to have a cigarette, still in this amusement park, still in the dream. And she lights his cigarette and starts talking to him, and she knows his name, and he's like, I know him in a dream. But I'm not afraid because I know I'm in a dream. And she's like, oh, you are afraid. And starts taunting him a little bit and lures him to this super creepy fun house. And and it's really interesting, the interplay between those characters. It's not like, I don't know. It stood out to me as something you wouldn't see these days, but it had a very much that dreamlike quality, which if you've ever had a dream where you talk to somebody or interact with someone where they know things, but you know that it's you who's informing that they know the thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they go to this fun house, and this is where I thought it got really racy for 1959. She goes, "Take me in there, Edward. It's dark inside, soft and cool and dark, please." And he's like, "How can I argue with a dream?" And then they do these weird camera angles and this bizarre pictures of stuff in the funhouse, which is super creepy. And
You know that
she looks
Maya,
at him.
I think, is supposed to have some significance. The name that there was like something about sirens or something like that.
That would make sense.
I should have looked that up, but
It was one point she what was her name is Maya the cat girl.
yeah,
And they kept making her Egyptian or something like that. Like she had some
they're trying to give that
secret
vibe.
wisdom.
Yeah.
And she goes, "We've been expecting you, Mr. Hall." And he's like, "What?" Because earlier in the episode, the first thing Mr. Hall hears as he enters the doctor's office is the receptionist say, "We've been expecting you." So you're thinking, oh, maybe it's tied into that or something.
Miss Thomas.
And yeah. And she goes, "You can," oh wait, he goes, "What?" And he goes, she goes, "You can kiss me now." And he's like, "What if I don't want to?" And she goes, "Oh, you want to." And he's like, "Look, whose dream is this anyway?" You know?
He almost did a Dangerfield.
Yeah. Hey. So all this weird, creepy funhouse stuff, like this like monkey statue starts sliding by and she's laughing her butt off. And he's like, "This is really weird."
It's insane.
And yeah. And so he goes back to talking about it, and he's like, "And I woke up and it was bizarre." And he's like, "The next day I went to sleep again, and I was in the same spot." And so he goes back into a dream again. And it picked up, and she's like, let's go on the roller coaster. And he's like, I can't. I've got a heart condition. She's like, but it's so fun. Look. And she drags him on there, and it builds and builds and builds, and you can hear the music going, and he's like looking all the different directions, and he's freaking out because he's scared of his heart. And it does that great old fashioned, like, we're going to project this behind them sort of thing for the roller coaster.
Early green screen type stuff.
Yeah. But like she's laughing and pointing all this stuff out, and he wakes up just before or just after she tells him to jump out because he's freaking out because it's too much.
You know that rear projection is since it's a dream, a nightmare is actually like plays to the episode's benefit.
Totally. Well, and there's other aspects of that too, where like there's like a fuzziness around the screen as they're doing the dream parts.
Like a vignette, a smear.
Yeah, it's so good. And what I noticed too is when he does the flashback versus when he does the dream, it's the same effect, which is interesting. And I wonder if there's some like symbolism in there too.
I'm sure that you can't trust anything you think.
Right. It's a memory or it's a dream. It's like all kind of the same thing. And so he gets up and he's like, "That's why, I'm convinced that if I go back to sleep, I'll die, And so if he says, "But if I stay awake, I know I'll die." And he's like, I got to go get some fresh air. And the doctor's like, "I don't recommend it." And so he's like, "What do you want me to do? Put a straitjacket on?" And he gets all mad and then goes outside and into the receptionist area. And dun dun dun, the receptionist looks
Miss
just
Thomas.
like Maya.
Yeah.
Miss Thomas.
Sweet Miss Thomas.
She doesn't even look up. Yeah, she doesn't even look up or anything from her typing. And he's like, he jumps back into the doctor's office. He yeets himself out the window.
Oh, Andy would be so proud. He loves to say yeet as well. It's hilarious. It is hilarious. It's just the funniest way to describe what happens here. He is absolutely yeeted.
inappropriate. One of my favorite things is if you pause as he runs, they clip the scene from when he starts pushing away from the door to run out to jump out the window. And if you pause it, you can see it's a completely different actor doing the stunt of jumping out the window. And he jumps out the window, and then they do the zoom down of him falling and screaming. So it's actually pretty intense, probably for 59.
Yeah.
And then the next scene is the doctor very calmly getting up from his chair, and I'm like, what the hell?
This happens all the time.
He's so chill. Another one out the window. Oh well.
Lord of mercy.
He stands up, goes and opens the door, and he says, "Oh, Miss Thomas." She's like, "Yes, doctor." He goes, "Would you come here, please?"
That'd been funny if he was just like, "Send in my next patient."
Would you come here, please? We had another one jump. I need to clean up this glass.
Oh my God. That's what turns it from horror to comedy.
Right, exactly. Over the top. And so she comes in, and then the camera angle changes, and we see Edward lying on the doctor's bench. And the doctor reaches down, takes his pulse, and he goes, "I'm afraid he's dead." And she goes, "What? He just came in a minute ago." And he goes, "I know. When he came in, I told him to sit down, and he did. In less than 2 seconds, he was asleep. And then he gave that scream you heard." And they close up on Edward, and she goes, "Heart attack?" And he goes, "Probably. Well, I guess there are worse ways to go. At least he died peacefully."
The irony
Wah,
is.
wah, wah.
What a great episode.
Still, he's so chill about this guy dying in his office.
He is. He's unflappable. That's why he made it to chief in San Francisco.
Yeah, right. And she's just like, but he's dead. Like she doesn't say that, but like, she's clearly like, this, you just had a guy die in your office. So anyway, it goes to the outro with Mr. Serling saying, "They say a dream only takes a second or so, and yet in that second a man can live a lifetime. He can suffer and die, and who's to say which is the greater reality, the one we know, the one in dreams, between heaven, the sky, the earth, in the Twilight Zone."
It's wonderful.
And I was still stuck on like, "Doc, you just had a guy die in your office." But who knows? Maybe that's typical.
It's so theatrical. Death on the Twilight Zone is very theatrical. Which is part of it for me, I think.
Yeah.
Especially now, going back, because now the at least with horror and darker sci-fi stuff, the gorier, the more drawn out is kind of what people are going for now, where in Twilight Zone, it's always a very dramatic, big thing that happens, and it happens quickly.
And it's matter of fact. And what's funny to me is like, it's you can tell it's a short show because it doesn't get in the way of the story. It's like, well, this guy died. Oh, well, bring in the next guy.
Yeah. There's an economy of storytelling there.
It doesn't necessarily reflect the reality unless there's something of my mentality of, a child of the 80s, born in the 70s, where like they were just more used to people dying more often then. I don't know, but it seems
smoking unfiltered Lucky Strikes all day, lighting one off of the other, drinking scotch in your office bar.
It seems a little jaded for someone who's to be like, poor sucker. Oh, well, at least he died in his sleep.
Can I get you a drink? All right. That was great. Next time we're going to be talking about, was there anything else you wanted to say about Perchance to Dream that we missed?
No, I think that settled in well. I don't know the Shakespeare quote that it's based on, but I think it's kind of loosely connected.
Yeah. If you just type Perchance to Dream into Google, you get the full thing. I think. Yeah, I can't remember what play, if it was Macbeth or something. Oh, yeah, because, oh, boy. Now I'm trying to remember the rest of the quote. I got to stop. So next week we'll be talking about Judgment Night. It's not Dennis Leary. It's
with soundtrack by what was it? Who are the people who did the sound. Okay, now we're totally digressing. Wow. Moving on to Judgment Night.
Yeah, Onyx,
next
right?
week.
Was it Onyx?
It was a bunch of people. It was like Pearl Jam. It was a bunch of duos. It was like hard rock and rap and like it was like Anthrax and some other group and like it
was a good soundtrack. I mean, it was for the '90s. It was cool when it came out. I haven't listened in a while.
Right.
Might not have held up so well. But
so this is not that.
Not that Judgment Night. This is the one that has Papa Mouskowitz from An American Tail in it as a Nazi.
Yentl's dad.
Yeah, Yentl's dad. It's another Streisand connection, number 2. 2 episodes in a row with a Streisand connection. That's the Twilight Zone.
Perfect.
All right.
All right.
Talk to you in a week.
Sounds good.